Hello, everyone. I'm Brianna Delaval. I'm currently majoring in music therapy, and I'm part of the Help Club and the Student Public Policy Forum at Chandler-Gilbert Community College. I am so honored to facilitate the first event of Women's History Month here at CGCC, and tonight we're going to hear from Deja Fox. Deja Fox is a 20-year-old activist, feminist, strategist, and influencer, leading thought at the intersection of social justice and social media. She is the founder of Gen Z Girl Gang, a student at Columbia University, and a digital creator with Ford Models. At just 19, she was the youngest staffer across the 2020 presidential campaigns while working for Kamala Harris as influencer and surrogate strategist. She has gone on to build innovative digital strategies for nonprofits and serves as the social media director at Acronym, an organization building digital infrastructure for the modern progressive movement. From issues like homelessness in high school to the forefront of the digital organizing and reproductive justice movement, Deja is changing the world at just 20 years old. She's been named a Teen Vogue 21 under 21, joined the Dazed 100, received Planned Parenthood Catalyst for Change Award, and helped more than 4,000 teens access care in her hometown through the El Rio Reproductive Health Access Project that she founded in 2017. She is so cool. I'm so thrilled for this. Please remember to put your questions for Deja in the chat section. Now, please join me in welcoming Deja Fox.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Brianna. I'm really excited to be here with everyone. I feel like it's sort of hard doing these Zoom events, and so I want to lay the ground rules a little bit too. I want this to be as conversational as possible. I want this to be as casual as it can be. In truth, I'm probably your age, maybe younger. And so I want this to be a back and forth. I want you to get out of it what you need. And so if we were in person, I'd be looking around the room, seeing what's resonating, but I can't. So please be as active as possible in the comments. Please drop questions as they come for you. There will be a Q&A section at the end with me and Brianna. And I'm really excited to kick this off. So my name is Deja Fox. I'm 20 years old. I'm an activist and I'm a strategist. I'm a digital creator. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm currently calling in from sunny San Diego. There's a little bit of sun coming in here, so I'm going to try to sit back a bit. And I use she and her pronouns. And I want to start us off in this conversation about leadership, right? That's really what we're going to look at today. We're going to talk about Gen Z. We're going to talk about being a young person. We're going to talk about what it is to be a leader and what leadership means to you. And so I kind of want to start out in the comments, just getting us active. Drop some things that, who do you think of when you think of a leader? It could be a specific person. It could be a kind of person. It could be someone specific to your school. I don't know. Drop some things, some people in the comments to get us thinking about, as a group, right? What is leadership? Who are leaders? Let's go ahead and just get the conversation moving there. I will also add that if you would like to connect with me on social media in the duration of this event, you can tag me at Deja Fox, and I would love to see it. That's another way you can stay engaged in this talk. So let's go ahead and get the comment section going. I want to hear what you guys, who you think of, what you think of. AOC, my mom, somebody who leads by example. That's really great, Katie. Or Caddy. Keep dropping examples. Let's think about, we see Lincoln, yeah, wonderful examples. Even characteristics of what makes a leader, right? What is leadership to us? I know for me, when I think of leadership, I think of a lot of examples. I think my mom, I'm really glad to hear that one. I think something similar. I think of not just the people who are elected to leadership positions, but of the people in our daily lives. And so I want you to get this image of who a leader is, right? And then let's think about who people are telling us leaders are. I think those are some of the questions we're going to interrogate in this next hour too. And if those things match up, right? And I want you to hold those people who you see as models of leadership with you in this discussion. And I also want you to be open to seeing yourself as a leader through this talk. I think that if I walked away today and each of you said, I see myself as a leader, or I feel a little bit more empowered in my leadership, I would have done what I wanted to do. So with that, now that we've got our brains working, we talked about people who aren't afraid to stand up for something, people who are helpful and caring and relatable, who solve problems, immigrants like our grandparents. Let's get moving. I'm gonna dive into my story. Keep moving in the comments though. I love to see what you all are saying, and I'll have them open on the side so I can be taking a peek. So I want to give you guys a little bit of context about me. We threw out a lot of titles and a little bit of my story, a little bit of my history, a little bit of the why am I here talking to you. But I want to get a little bit deeper, and we have the time to do that. And I think that's what's really special about these talks, right? Some people, whether you're engaging with me on social media, right, on Instagram, TikTok, whatever, I rarely get to sit down and have a conversation like this, where I get to just tell you about me and I get to learn about you in turn. And so let's get into it. Starting at the beginning, let's throw it all the way back to the year 2000. I was born to a single mom, like many of you, I'm sure. I'm a first-generation American, meaning that my father immigrated here. I grew up in Tucson, Arizona. Do I have anybody from Tucson in here? Maybe. My Southern Arizona friends, which is one reason I'm very excited to be here as well. And I grew up in a household like so many across the nation, right? A household where we struggled to make ends meet. We lived in Section 8 housing. I grew up on food stamps. And, I grew up in a house where my mom didn't go to college before me. She bounced between jobs, often minimum wage jobs, everything from the florists to the post office. And she did her best to make ends meet. And yes, born in Tucson. And she did the best she could to make ends meet for me and her. And because of issues, mainly economic pressures, and some larger ones, right, about our own healthcare system, my mom struggled with substance abuse. She did for a very long time. And by the time I was 15, I ended up moving out. And that's sort of where I like to place my story. I kind of think, in some sense, that's where we begin. Obviously it starts long before. And when people ask why I'm involved in politics, what got me interested, I let people know that, I was born into the political. My life was political from the jump. But when I was 15, I made sort of an active move into the politics space. And I did so through the sex education in my school district. So when I was 15, I moved out of my mom's house because of issues of substance abuse. And I experienced what 1 in 30 teens in the US are experiencing, and that's called hidden homelessness. And to give you a little bit of a sense of what hidden homelessness can look like living with friends, maybe a partner, but living outside of your own home. And so for me, that looked like living with my boyfriend at the time and his family. And to give you some perspective, 1 in 30, if your class sizes in high school looked anything like mine, is like 1 kid in every classroom. And that's not to say that this is evenly distributed, right? There are some schools with higher concentrations and some with less, but it is a pervasive issue and an experience that many people have, though it may be hard to talk about, and maybe that's why we hear less of it. And I was one of those people that had a very, very hard time talking about what was going on at home. I felt a lot of shame around it. I felt a lot of guilt. I felt that it was a secret I had to hide. And, that led to my own, to a lot of problems in school. And 2 of those being that I didn't get reelected to student council. So freshman year, I'd been kind of that girl who was like, in all the things, doing all the things, like a model leader on my campus. Freshman year, I was in student council, I was on the volleyball team, right? Come sophomore year, after I'd moved out, I couldn't really keep it up anymore. I didn't win my reelection, and I didn't make the volleyball team. And I'll never forget, the coach said it was because I had a bad attitude, which in retrospect, like, who wouldn't? And, you know, I looked at myself in this moment and I didn't see a leader. And in part, that was because I had tied my view of being a leader to these positions, to this kind of acceptance, to this general idea of who a leader is, what leadership means, right? And I wasn't a leader in that sense. And I couldn't be, because that leadership was not accessible to me. It wasn't made for me. In fact, I feel like it was made to exclude people like me. But that same year in high school, I saw an even greater issue, and that was the sex education I was being taught in the classroom. So I was sitting there, and this professor is not the right word. He was like the health teacher. I think he was also the baseball coach. And I'm sure some of you have your own sex ed stories, especially if you're from Arizona. And he was skipping through this PowerPoint on contraception, right? Just breezing through it. And I was sitting there like, what are we doing? And I distinctly remember him saying that because we went to UHS, which is the school I went to in high school, it was a selective, mostly white, upper middle class high school, that our parents would teach us this and he didn't have to. And I was like, I don't have parents at home. No one is gonna teach me this. And I looked around and realized that not only was this curriculum not made for me, but it was built to disadvantage students like me, right? It was made, in a sense, not only with not me in mind, but with keeping students like me down in mind, right? And so I started to get active. I met an organizer from Planned Parenthood, and she helped me see the power in my story. She sat me down, and I remember being vulnerable with her for the very first time and explaining what was going on at home. And I did so because she asked, do you want to go to this training, or do you want to go to this tabling event? And I had to be honest with her that, I can't make it because my family doesn't have a car. I don't have a way to get there. And Melissa, who was the organizer, did something that I think we could all take a lesson from. And she said, I'll pick you up, right? It's something as simple as that. And because she invested in me, because she met me where I was at, as any good organizer should, I was able to make it to those trainings. I was able to go on to those tabling events and explore my passions. And I was able to see the power in my story and my experiences. And I started going to school board meetings. And I would get up in front of my school board during community call. They give you about 2 minutes, and anyone could talk. And I would just tell them about my experiences with the sex ed that they were teaching me. These elected officials, right, 5 of them. And I'll never forget the first day I went. I had this tiny little note card, like a Post-it note type style thing. Had all my things written out on it, every word I wanted to say. And I stood up there literally shaking. There was 5 school board members. If you've ever been to a school board meeting, these are not the community event. These are not pop-in. There's 10 people in the audience, maybe, mostly reporters, Daily Star types. And I don't even really remember what I said. Did I hit every point on there? Probably not. Was it my best storytelling? Probably not. But when I sat down in the audience, I started to cry because I realized the power in my story, and I felt free to share it in a way that I never had before. I'd gotten really good at hiding what was going on at home, whether that was, telling my friends, oh, no, my mom's coming to pick me up, and then walking to the bus station or something like this. I had gotten exceptionally good at hiding my story, hiding what was going on, hiding who I was. And in that moment, I shared it, and I shared it in a way that was empowering to me, in a way that was uncomfortable but was not unsafe. I had support. I had a person behind me. And I say all of this to say that in that moment, I not only was given the opportunity to own my story, my narrative, my experiences, but I got to redefine what leadership meant for me, right? For me before, leadership was this idea of, are you popular enough to get elected to student council? Do you have a good enough attitude to make the volleyball team again this year? And the answer time and time again was no, no. And I was not a leader in the way that my school was asking me to be. But because someone invested in me, another woman of color, because she went out of her way to meet me where I was at, because she showed me my own power, I was able to take up leadership in a completely different manner. And so the point that I really want to stress is that usually it is not that you are not a leader, but rather that your leadership is not being valued in the place you are at. And that was my lesson, was that my leadership was not being valued in my high school, but that did not mean that I wasn't a leader. It meant that I had to take my leadership where it would be appreciated, where it would be protected, where it would be valued. And that was in the reproductive justice movement. That was on the other side of the school, right? That was railing against my school board members. And in that sense, taking my own story and making it my own and not trying to fit into a mold, making leadership my own, making it work for me. And, you know, that one moment led me to bringing my friends along, empowering them to do the same, teaching them about storytelling, teaching them about the ins and outs of sex education and the school board. And after 6 months of continually showing up, bringing my peers, organizing around this issue of sex education, we won. And for the next year and a half, I would sit on a board rewriting that curriculum. And we've seen substantial change in TUSD, my school district, which is the largest in Southern Arizona. And seeing that impact, that telling my story, right? It was just one story, but it empowered others to tell theirs too. And together, we could make real change. It instilled in me a passion that hasn't gone away, something that I think is lifelong. And we're going to come back to this at the end, but I think identifying this through line of your life, right? This idea of what connects all of the things that I do is really important because you will do many things. I worked at a gas station when I was in high school, and I worked on a presidential campaign just a few years ago. But let me tell you that no matter where I was, I knew my through line. And my through line is change making. My through line is being a good role model, someone people can look up to. And no matter what job or position I hold, what school I go to, I know that I am more than whatever is on my business card, more than any introduction or biography, because I am that. I am a good role model at the end of the day. So we'll circle back to that towards the end, but keep that in mind too. What is the through line of you, whether you are in a place that values your leadership, doesn't, you're looking for that space. Let's keep in mind what our through lines are too. And maybe we can share some of that at the end. But now I want to talk a little bit about where I took that leadership. So we've talked about where it started, who was in my corner, who helped me see it, what were some of the barriers to my own perception and my own execution of taking up leadership, right? Some of those barriers being my school or transportation, some of those being perceived barriers about my own views of myself. But I want to talk now about how I've expanded that work and how I did in high school. And so all of this happened when I was 15. When I was 16, I started to expand my work. And I knew I wanted to stay within this Planned Parenthood realm, in this realm of like creating choice for myself and for others. And in truth, again, this comes back to my personal story. I didn't struggle to find what issue I wanted to work on because there was enough issues in my own life that I simply took a deep look at my personal life and said, what needs to be better? Where are these systems failing me? And how can I change them? And so when I thought about that, I thought about living with my boyfriend at the time and not having access to birth control. I didn't have parents, I didn't have insurance, I didn't have money. And I ended up going to Planned Parenthood and receiving that care. And now I received that care under what was called Title X, which is a grant for low-income people to get this kind of care. And at the time, 2016, our Senate was voting against, or rather was voting on Title X, and our previous Senator, Jeff Flake, was voting against Title X. So against my access to the birth control that I needed, that I knew I needed to take control of my body and my future. And I went to his town hall in Mesa, and I asked him a question. And I think the question, well, I'll pose it to you all, and then we can chat about it a little bit too. But the question was one of leadership again. I asked why he, as a white man, privileged, middle-aged, was making choices about me and my body. When we come from vastly different backgrounds, when I'm the one who's affected and he is not, without ever having consulted me, without ever having talked to women like me in my situation. And he told me that he supported policies that support the American dream. And I told him, then support Planned Parenthood. And why would you deny me the American dream? I made the connection that birth control helped me go on to college, to be the first in my family to go to college. I hadn't yet done that, but I was gunning for it, right? I had my eye on it. I asked him, why he would deny me that. And I think this question too goes to our idea of who is a leader. We talked a little bit about my own perceptions, institutional barriers at a very young age. But now I also want us to think about who are leaders that we see, who are our representatives, right? When we talked about leaders at the beginning, some people said like AOC, some people said Lincoln. There was a lot of politician names that got thrown out there, a lot of people who are or were our elected officials. And I think something to think about is who, when we think of a leader, right? Maybe in an abstract sense, who are we made to think of? Who are the leaders we see in TV shows or on the news? And who are we not seeing? What kind of leaders are not being promoted or, we're not seeing examples of? And I will say that my personal experience was that I didn't see many leaders that not only looked like me, elected officials particularly, but who had lived lives like me. And I think when we really get into it, right, what is a representative if not a representative? They are elected to represent people and experiences. And in my situation, the situation with Jeff Flake, he was not representing me and my experience, which is his job that we as Arizonans paid him to do. And so I think that's something else for us to sit with and think about. And maybe we can put some things in the comments again. Who are some leaders that or rather, what is the traditional view of a leader, right? What leaders are we seeing maybe overrepresented in the media? What kinds of people? Who are we not seeing enough of? Who do we want to see more of? What kind of leaders do we want to see more of? What kind of identity groups or experiences? Representation matters. And I think that's at the core of it, right? Representation does matter. And it makes a difference when you have people, whether you're an activist and you're knocking on the door to get into the offices of these elected officials, or on the level of, right, a corporation, maybe deciding what models they put out or what shows they're going to produce. Representation matters, not just on screen, but behind the scenes too, in those decision-making places. So that's my next question that I'll leave you with is, what kind of leaders do we want to see more of? Who are we not seeing represented enough? And then, I'll let you think about this on your own, but what does that mean for you, right? What would it mean to see a leader who embodies those qualities or those identities or those experiences? And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about my next sort of phase of this journey into leadership. And that was the El Rio Reproductive Health Access Project. And this was something that grew out of my own experiences. So I went viral when I was 16 after having fought for sex ed. And when I came back home, I had spent some time in DC lobbying, being in the offices of senators and congresspeople talking about why birth control was important with Planned Parenthood. And I came back home to Tucson, and I had a new sense of confidence that had been instilled in me. And I thought, I think I want to go to college. I think I'm going to apply to Columbia, which is the school I go to in New York. And it started to face me that, I was going to leave my community soon, and I wanted to leave behind a legacy that really mattered. I wanted to create something that was what I needed. And that was the El Rio Reproductive Health Access Project. And what I think is so beautiful about it is that it was not founded by me and me alone, but rather spearheaded by a healthcare provider who brought young people in and brought in young people with diverse perspectives. So someone like me, right, who was high achieving, but was also experiencing homelessness, who was also working at the gas station. She brought in teen moms, brought in people who were previously incarcerated, folks who had struggled with substance abuse, other homeless youth. And in that sense, the people who are running this program, right, the youth leaders, the peer sex educators, are the people most affected. And I think when I think about a leader, who should be the leader, right? I think that is one of the most important parts, is that the people most affected should be the leaders of their own movements, should be the leaders creating the solutions, getting the funding to solve the problems that they are facing. I think all too often, we think that so-and-so is more qualified to solve the problems of others, when in fact, the people who are the most affected, our community members, are often the ones best equipped to solve their own problems and to identify their own problems, or rather barriers maybe. But all that to say, we founded this group of peer sex educators who were some of the most affected youth, and we started hosting free teen clinics. They're hosted still to this day every week in Tucson, and at them, people can get STI testing, PrEP and PEP, and any method of birth control that works for them at absolutely no cost. They've served thousands of young people, and it is a wonderful program. It's called El Rio Reproductive Health Access Project, El Rio RAP for short. And I think what is so special about it is that it was what I needed when I was 15. It was the leadership I needed, right? Our youth leaders get paid to do this work, so maybe I wouldn't have been hustling so much at the gas station. Our young leaders are the people most affected. They are untraditional leaders, right? They're not the people who are getting elected to student council and have a million different titles and positions. And so in that sense, it built the leadership opportunity that I had needed. But on the other end, it also filled the gap that I needed in healthcare services, right? The issue I was facing. And it did it in a really innovative and interesting way. And I say all that to say that this program is successful, and it has been for years. It's been running since 2017. And it is because of the leadership of young people who are the most affected. And I think it is a prime example of redefining leadership and also creating spaces that are inclusive for leaders who bring a unique perspective. And I think perspective is another word that we're going to come back to. So I want you to hold perspective in mind too. I think that the thing that those leaders bring that is the most valuable is their perspective. So now in my personal journey, we're getting to the moment where I leave Arizona. And this moment was really big for me. I had always lived in Arizona. I had only recently begun to think that maybe I would leave, maybe that I would go elsewhere. And in my senior year of high school, I received an acceptance to Columbia University on a full ride. So I don't pay anything to go there. I'm the first in my family to go to college. And I had never even been to New York or visited Columbia when I submitted my binding application, which I think if any of you were the first in your family to go to college, you and I are kind of you can maybe understand the confusion that comes with it, having to apply on your own, trying to figure out scholarships, and who knows all of the intricacies of higher education when there is no example. And that was my experience. So I got in. I became the first in my family to go to college. I moved to New York City, and it was an entire shift for me, not only in my work and in my private life as well. But to focus in on sort of the work piece, my leadership had always been about community organizing, right? Whether that was for sex education or birth control access, it was so deeply rooted in my community, my geographic community, right? Arizona senator or my school board. And when I moved to New York, I was very disoriented. I started to ask myself, how does one be a community organizer when they are no longer in their community? And I began to redefine what community meant for me. And I realized that I realized that to me, community was the people I shared experiences with. It wasn't necessarily just the people I was living around. And to be frank, at Columbia, it certainly wasn't. I experienced a kind of wealth that I had never knew existed before I got there. And these kids were not living lives like me. And so I realized that in my personal experience, that community was people that shared experience with me. And that those people were people I was largely connecting with online. And so I started an organization called GenZ Girl Gang. And it is a digital community of online women and femmes who are really looking to redefine what sisterhood means in this social media era. I know if any of you are like around my age, which I'm assuming a lot of you are, we've had phones for like forever. I've had my Facebook since I was like 11. Ew, same one I still have, right? And so we've never really lost touch with anyone, and we are a very unique generation in that sense. And so I want to pause a little bit here to talk about our generation. And when I'm talking about Gen Z, what I mean is people born from 1996 to 2010. Many of us are either just graduating high school, right? Or entering the workforce. Many of us are within our higher education journey or of that age. And we are an interesting generation for many reasons. The first being that, well, let's not rank them, but the first that I'll speak about is that we grew up during the 2008 recession, which really, I think, colored you. I'm sure some of you can think about your own personal experiences, right? Like my mom lost a job in that recession. That was incredibly difficult. It set us back a lot. And a lot of people who were living on the edge of poverty or in poverty experienced the feelings of that recession, right, which came from Wall Street, the most deeply. So that's one thing to understand about our generation. Another thing to understand is that we've always had social media. I think often about how my mom would like drive us on road trips between like California or Nevada, and like she didn't have Google Maps. Like that's wild. Couldn't be me. Another example, right? Like we've always had Google in our pocket. Say you don't know what that means, or you need to translate something, or you want to look up what that food is, right? Whatever it is, we have had the ability to answer any question, pretty much any question, in our pocket for our entire lives. Similarly, we've had the ability to connect with other people in an instant for forever. And on the converse of that, people have been able to reach us instantly for our entire lives, which is a complete shift in terms of growing up. And yeah, it's a complete shift in terms of the way that we socialize. And in some ways, I think we've yet to see if this is like good or bad. I think most things are a mix of both. But those are some important aspects to understand of our generation. I think another question I kind of want to leave you with, it's not quite as tied to the theme of this event, but is really like, how is this pandemic going to affect you? How has it affected you already? How is it going to affect our generation as a whole? I mean, this is a global event, something that's totally unprecedented. And it's something I spend a lot of time thinking about, actually, is what is this doing to our generation? But that is to give a little bit of context on Gen Z and why I think our generation is so incredibly special, and what sets us apart. I often say that for our generation, social media is our superpower. And I believe that wholeheartedly. And so all this to say, this is our generation. This is who we are. And Gen Z Girl Gang is an organization that I founded that really experiments with this idea of like, how do we, as people who are native to this digital landscape, really embrace a feminist movement? How do we create an online platform and online spaces that put collaboration over competition, that change social norms, that allow us to be more successful and build power in our personal networks? And I think it's a really warranted question. There's so much power in those applications on our phones to connect us with others. And this digital revolution is the first, right? When we think about like the Industrial Revolution and subsequent ones, that women and people of color have the opportunity to really gain substantial benefits from. And that is what Gen Z Girl Gang is asking questions about and trying to experiment with. And I founded that in my freshman year of college because I was looking and asking those questions myself as someone who's displaced from my community to go to school. That brings me to sort of the next piece of this journey, which I think is sort of the most recent and the one that I think maybe ties a bow around this question of Gen Z as the leaders of today. And that was when I came back from, I had spent the summer after my freshman year backpacking through Wyoming, very odd, very random, a part of some fellowship I was in, not my choice. Just kidding. And I get back to my sophomore year dorm and I'm literally unpacking. Like I'm taking clothes out of my suitcase, hanging them up in the little wardrobe, right? Like I'm getting my dorm ready to go. And I got a DM on Instagram from someone who worked closely with the Kamala Harris campaign. And that DM was just a quick little job description. And they were like, do you know anyone who might be a good fit? I was like, yeah, I think I have some friends who just graduated this year. And I just saw this in the chat. Is there a link to Gen Z Girl Gang or something? It's at Gen Z Girl Gang on Instagram. It's simple to find in that way. And I would love for you to connect with us there. But we're pulling it back into the story. I was unpacking this dorm room. I was getting ready to start classes. And I got this DM with a job description. I said, I have some friends that just graduated. Let me go ahead and check in with them. And I'll send you some recommendations tonight. And then this person on the other end was like, have you considered it? I think you would be a great fit. And again, I think this is one of those moments where I kind of reflect back to Melissa, right? That Planned Parenthood organizer who stepped up to drive me to trainings, who helped me see the power in my story at the very beginning. Because this was another woman of color saying, I think you're qualified. I think you're good enough. In fact, I would bet on it. And I've been blessed to have a series of women in my life who have done this for me, who have seen my potential when I haven't and pushed me to see it too. And I think, in a sense, that is leadership. Leadership is bringing people in, helping them see their own power, right? It's not being this like voice for the voiceless, but rather empowering people, passing them the mic, building new stages. And so she asked me if I would consider doing it. and I started packing my dorm back up. And within 2 weeks, I had moved to Baltimore, Maryland, which was a place I had literally never been before. I signed a lease on my new apartment, first apartment I ever had, and I started work on the Kamala Harris campaign like a few weeks later. And I started as the influencer and surrogate strategist. I worked full-time out of the headquarters, and I worked on the digital team. And I won't lie to you, when I got there, not even when I got there, before I even got there, I was nervous. I was only 19. In large part, I had never seen someone at 19 go into a presidential campaign at this level of leadership, right? I was sitting across from the guys who were like writing the policies, and just down the hall is the person who's building this presidential candidate's schedule. And I felt really overwhelmed, and I felt really nervous. And I'll even say this was one of the first times, maybe not first, but one of the most major cases of imposter syndrome I ever felt. I'll break down what it meant, what that job looked like in just a second. But I want to first preface the experience of walking in, and knowing that I was younger, knowing that I didn't have a college degree yet, knowing that I did have the experience. I'd been working in politics at this point for years, right? Since I was 15, I had 4 years of experience under my belt. I had built digital communities. I had worked at a GenZ marketing agency for 1.5 years as a senior partner. I had been doing this work. I was more than qualified, even on paper. But still, I walked in and I knew I was different from your traditional staffer. I was different than the image of a leader in this space in my head, for sure. And I remember being so nervous. And I cried in the bathroom my first day. Leaders cry. It's totally fine. Leaders feel nervous. And the presentation that my boss gave when he sort of onboarded all of us began with a picture of all of the past vice presidents. And as you can imagine, it's just a bunch of white guys, right? And then, or not vice president, I'm sorry, a photo of all of the past presidents, a bunch of white guys. At this point, Kamala Harris is running for president. That was the part of the campaign that I was on in the primary. And, I looked at that and I thought about, again, what are we taught to think a leader looks like? What kind of representation have I seen, has been made available to me? And how is this candidate that I'm working for redefining that idea of who gets to be a leader in this space? And the next thing that my boss said is something that will probably stick with me for the rest of my professional career. And I hope you take with you as well. And it was one word, it was perspective. And he said to us, many of you have never worked on a campaign before. There were definitely people with more campaign experience, but we picked you. And we picked you because of your perspective, because of the lived experiences that we brought into those rooms, right? And in that way, I want you to remember that, yes, education, what you're bringing in that sense, your work experience, all of that is incredibly important. But I would argue equally important is the lived experiences that you bring with you everywhere you go. And for me, right, that's experiences of homelessness. Those are experiences of being the first in my family to go to college, being a woman of color. All of these lived experiences have built the perspective that I bring into every room. And I often say that I think my experience is my expertise. And so that kind of brings me to the next piece that you asked about is what's a surrogate strategist? And I think to understand why I took on this position, you have to also understand what I was doing. And so we can get into that. I worked as the influencer and surrogate strategist on the digital team. And the digital team, right, we do everything from like social media, we're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, right? We're producing content like videos and pictures that you see coming from the campaign trail. And it was my job to work with content creators and community builders online. So, think of influencers that you really like, but also think of like, we might visit a campus and we would find some leaders on that campus, or I would find leaders on that campus who might be interested in engaging with us. And so for me, my job was really looking at who holds influence in any given community, and how can we empower them online to talk about our candidate and our message effectively. And I want to pause here also to remind you that I did not have a college degree at this point. I still don't. I don't even have a major. So if you're like, oh my God, she has it all figured out, I literally don't. Quick reminder. But I didn't have that college degree yet. This was a brand new field. This is something that did not exist even 4 years ago on a presidential campaign, right? The internet has evolved a lot. And so I had to remember, every day I had to remind myself that this space is new. Nobody is getting a doctorate in TikTok. And I am the expert here. As a young person, I am the expert in digital. As a young person, I know best what influencers people are paying attention to and listening to. I have this experience having used Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat and all of this for my entire life. And that is the kind of experience that you can't learn in school, or you can't learn on the job even. It comes with a kind of fluidity that I think is really valuable. And I think that in some ways too is what I want young people to walk away with when they think about why they are uniquely suited to take up leadership opportunities, or rather leadership positions in this moment. Everything is going digital. Because of this pandemic, even more so, right? We saw an entire presidential campaign go digital, no more big rallies. And it's not just happening in the political space, whether, you're thinking about music, right? That is too, no more concerts, not this year. And everything, because of the pandemic, has moved digital even quicker than it already was. And I believe that young people are uniquely suited to own those leadership spaces. And I want you to feel empowered by that. I want you to think, maybe digital isn't for you, but to think about the ways that your experience, who you are, the way you grew up, the things that you've learned just living, make you uniquely suited for jobs and for leadership roles. And that was true for me. I had to remind myself every day that my experience was my expertise, that my perspective as an individual mattered in these rooms, and that my story was my superpower, that the story that I brought is something that nobody else could bring to this work. And that is incredibly important. And so, yeah, that's sort of where I kind of want to leave you with the campaign, is understanding that was a completely new role. I was the youngest across any of the 2020 presidential campaigns. And one, I was nervous. There was a lot of nerves, a lot of feelings of, am I good enough? But at the end of the day, the thing that kept me knowing that I was, that allowed me to say yes in the first place, was seeing the value in myself, in my perspective, in my experiences, and in my story. I hope you walk away with that, if anything, from this, that the person you are is valuable. It creates value. And it matters. It influences everything you do, and it can be the thing that makes you successful in your own right. And I think I kind of want to circle back a little bit now. I'm trying to remember maybe if someone can remind me of the time we're going to transition to Q&A. I want to throw a little plug in to everybody that's chatting. To put in questions, and if someone can, 6:25, perfect. So I'm just about on time. I'm going to do a little bit of like a 5-minute wrap up here, and put a bow on this story for you. And I would like to encourage you now to continue sending questions so we can make this a real dialogue. We can make this a conversation, whether it's defining terms, going deeper on a story, or even just, a personal question, something you're trying to figure out, something you're dealing with, something you want my hot take on. It could be something you know about that maybe I didn't even touch on. So to bring us full circle, to put a cap on it, I came from a background that many leaders do not. And it has taught me to be the person that I am today. Growing up in Section 8 housing, right, bouncing between homes as a teenager, seeing firsthand the way that my sex education or my access to reproductive health care was shorted. All of these things gave me a perspective that goes so far beyond any kind of research or academic readings, right? I have a lived experience that has made me an expert and has propelled me into so many rooms that I hadn't even expected for myself, whether that was sitting live on CNN with Don Lemon talking about my exchange with Jeff Flake, or a classroom at Columbia where I'm the very first person in my family to go to college, or meetings on a presidential campaign, talking about how we could elect this woman of color to be the first and to take up this space and this leadership of her own and make space for others. And I did it in part because I recognized the value that I brought to the table. And I want to encourage each of you to do that too. And again, I think this comes back to that through line, that you are so much more than anything that could be on a business card. You are the summation of all of your experiences, and they are valuable and they are necessary now more than ever. Whether it's because you are a young person who's bringing in a new kind of expertise that's cutting edge and changing the game, or because you come from a marginalized background where people, the people most affected are not the ones telling their own stories or being represented or creating solutions. We need you. And we need you just as you are. And we need you to be bold, and we need you to set examples and take up space. And it's not always going to be easy. And in fact, a lot of times you're going to end up crying in the bathroom. I know I have. But I hope you know that there will be people there to catch you. Whether those are the mentors who put you on in the first place and who invest in you because they see you, they see your potential, and they push you to see it too. Or the friends who hold your hand when you're scared and tell you you're good enough and ride with you through the good and the bad. Just know that there are people in your corner. And if you are looking for your leadership, if you're saying, they say you can't be it if you can't see it, and you're not seeing it, I want to push you to see it in yourself. I want you, the next time you're asked what a leader looks like, to say me. I am what a leader looks like. I embody leadership, and I do it in these ways because you are, and we need you, and we need you just as you are. And so with that, I think we can go ahead and transition into a conversation. And I want to thank you all for sharing this space with me and letting me share my story, opening up in the comments. And I look forward to continuing to connect with you. Again, my Instagram is @DejaFox, and my organization is @GenZ Girl Gang. And we can continue the conversation there as well. But let's go ahead and hop into Q&A, if that's all right. Hey, Brianna.
Hi, everyone. First, before I start the Q&A, I just want to say thank you to Deja. That was amazing. I took so many notes. You mentioned that the Planned Parenthood organizer, Melissa, inspired you to see the merit of your own story, and you're allowing us to see that in ourselves. So I think that that's so amazing. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
But I'll start with our questions. Okay. So our first question is, what would you say to Gen Z students who are experiencing imposter syndrome moments as they step into challenging new roles?
This is such a good question. I also saw someone ask, what is imposter syndrome? And a valid question, a good question. I think it's hard to put our fingers on even sometimes, but I think it's the sense of believing, it's a personal sense of believing that you are not meant to be, or you do not deserve to be where you are, whether that's a job or a school or a relationship or any number of things. A belief that you are either not capable or not worthy of being in the position you're in. And my advice to any young people who are experiencing imposter syndrome is one, well, I'll start with a story. And I think some of this, maybe you'll think it's funny, maybe you won't. I do. When I got to Columbia, everyone was like, oh my God, like I heard so much about imposter syndrome, right? This is an Ivy League school. I was like, I worked my entire life to get here. Like, what am I going to experience? And in truth, when I got there, imposter syndrome is not what I experienced. I looked around and saw completely average young people and was like, oh my God, I've been lied to. And I think that in fact, when you look around these places that you have long been intimidated from, where the doors have been slammed in your face, right? Where you've been barred from being, you will actually find, if you take a hard look around, that so many people are just figuring it out too. And that if you have a sense, as I do when I walk into classrooms at Columbia, that you deserve to be there, that you worked to get there, no one can take that from you. When you know you deserve your spot, no one can convince you otherwise. And I think some ways to remind yourself that you are deserving is to know that you are inherently worthy, and that no numbers, whether they be grades or test scores, whatever, determine your worth or your intelligence or your potential, that's not measurable. And that, like I said, your perspective is valuable and it needs to be in those rooms. So that's what I would say. Expand your definition of the ways that you qualify yourself, and know that there are things that qualify you that are so much bigger than any of those little numbers.
Okay, our next question is, what would you recommend to someone who wants to go into the digital strategy industry?
Whoop, whoop. I would say don't wait. Do not wait for a degree. Don't wait for the perfect job offer. And know that digital strategy could mean anything from politics to working with brands, to working with influencers, right? And like people in general. Digital strategy right now is like the thing, and everybody is making it up. This is the gag, my friends. Everybody in this space is making it up. It's brand new. And making it up, you could say they're innovating, they're creating, but I want you to know that they are making it up. We are making it up. And you, as a young person, I'm assuming you're young, right? You have this different kind of understanding of the internet that just cannot be learned. And that is a superpower. So I would say, 1, don't wait, get started now. 2, if you're interested in doing it for like a campaign, look for small campaigns in your area, maybe even like a city council member or a school board member, and ask, hey, can I, if you're looking to get your foot in the door, just simply send them an email and be like, can I, manage your social media? Can I produce some videos for you? And you might be surprised that some of these smaller campaigns have no digital strategy, no digital team at all. They're doing it on their own, and they would very much appreciate your help. And it could be a really good way to start learning. So that is my tip on how to get your foot in the door, and also my push to remind you that people are making it up. Don't wait on having some kind of qualification. You can do it now.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to ask a quick question that I have really quickly.
Yeah, let's do it.
What type of social media content do you find to be the most effective for influencing people to believe in their own power and themselves? Because I really care about mental health, and that's mental health and self-worth. So I was just curious about what you used to help people with that.
That is such a good question. And, I think social media is great in the sense that, like, we can connect with people we never would have connected with otherwise. Say you come from a small town where nobody really looks like you or believes what you believe, right? And a lot of people feel a sense of isolation. And now they can connect with people like you or me who maybe share their beliefs or are interested in what we're interested in. They can see themselves in us and our stories. And so some of the things that I think have been most effective in my experience, and again, this is just my own experience, and helping others believe in themselves, is 1, being the best, most full version of me, not sugarcoating it, right? And being kind of bold in the things that I put out there and reminding people that I am a whole person. I think all too often, and each of us is maybe a little bit guilty of this, we try to curate this perfect image of who we are. But I'm telling you now that people have a hard time seeing themselves in perfect people because none of us are. And so if you want to lead by example, be comfortable being a little imperfect. And lead by example. Tell your story. Use your superpower and the thing that will always be yours and that you'll have to own, and that's your story. I would also say that you don't have to be a content creator to do this work, right? Maybe you're someone who writes articles. That's totally fine too. Maybe you're not as comfortable being on camera. That's okay. And know that whether you have 1 follower or 1 million followers, those people are tapped into you. They have a personal investment in you and they're listening to what you say. And that's a responsibility and a privilege. So use it wisely and go be the influencer you are.
Thank you. That was so well said. I definitely will do that. Our next question is, with the recent success of WandaVision, do you feel that women are getting more valued in the entertainment industry? Ooh, I like this question.
I haven't watched it. I feel like I don't even know what to say because I haven't watched it. Ooh, sorry guys. I feel like I'm letting you down. But I will say that, the entertainment community is not my community. I've always worked in politics. But representation comes in so many different ways. And so when we were thinking about that through line, right, like who am I outside of my job? Know that you could go from working in politics to working in the entertainment sector, right, to working in higher education. But if you have that through line, that purpose, you can apply it to any community, any industry, any problem, any job. And so I think that there are some amazing folks, particularly women of color out there who are revolutionizing the entertainment community and the industry in general, and that their work is super valid. And though I work in politics, their work is super important too. And each of us, we need everyone in every industry to be committed to change making.
Yes. Okay, our next question is, how did you maintain your motivation to promote change?
Ooh, what a good question. I ask myself this every day. I'm looking for motivation every day, and we're in like a year of this pandemic. I came in at 19 years old. I'm leaving at 21. Super whack. I don't know if anyone else feels that way. I certainly do. And motivation is like the biggest thing, right? Like I got the time. What I do not have right now is the energy and the motivation. But I will say, so I got 2 points. One, I am in large part motivated by this idea of investment, that women have invested in me, that organizer who took time to drive me, those women who put my name into rooms and said she's qualified, we should hire her. They invested in me. And I feel a deep sense of responsibility to return on that investment. Whether that's by being the best version of myself and or by bringing other women along, promoting them, bringing them into rooms, helping them, feel confident enough to do the thing that they're meant to do. And so, one, I feel motivated by that sense of investment. And two, I feel motivated by people. I say this often, and it is true, that we are going to win some and we are going to lose some. I've won some campaigns. I've lost some campaigns. But one thing is true, that you never lose when you invest in people. I'm going to say that one more time because it is very important. You never lose when you invest in people. In the sense that when you empower the people around you, you are building the next generation of leaders who are going to take on their own fights, leaders who are going to pick up the slack when you need a break, when you need to take some time out of office, right? And that is movement building. So whether you win or lose, if you focused on on how you do what you do, on empowering the people around you, you never lose. So that's motivating in a sense as well.
Yes, and definitely take care of yourself, If you feel good, you can help others feel good.
Totally.
In your work, what did you find to be the most successful next step towards establishing common understanding with others that disagreed with your views?
This is maybe an edgy opinion, but I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not the one to convince the people who disagree with me. I'm not. That is work for others. I think there are so many people, right? When we think about voting, right? This is a good example. You can either flip someone from voting one way to voting the other way. And often we think that's how we get candidates elected. I'm gonna tell you right now, that is not how I plan to get candidates elected. I plan to get candidates elected by engaging the people who already agree with us, but don't have a path to vote, right? Who don't have the motivation or understanding or access to participating. And so that is my theory of change making, is that I do not waste my energy arguing with people who really get off on disagreeing with me, who disregard my humanity in large part. And instead, I'm going to invest my energy in making it easier for the people who agree with me to engage, to take that next step, to be a leader, to manifest their beliefs in their own way. And that is the kind of leadership and the role that I play. And that is not to say that there are not people who are doing that work of changing minds. Absolutely they are. Shout out to them. We need them. It's not me.
Our next question is, can you give recommendations for people with fire that they don't know what to do with? So they're motivated, but they're trying to find what avenue they should take.
Okay, fiery. I love that. Yes, take that fire. Don't know what to do with it. I mean, I've been here, right? And I was blessed that someone came into my life and was like, hey, I have this outlet for you. Take it. And I think in a sense, if you open up to people about what your wants are, where you want to go, right? If you go sit with your advisor at school or your friends or even your family and you talk about the things you want to do, somebody has an idea. I bet somebody could tell you, oh, I actually know that they're looking for volunteers at that vaccine distribution center down the street. Or that campaign is totally hiring for an organizer right now. And I think something that's really important is like opportunities don't often fall in our lap unless we talk about them, talk about what we want. So go out there, tell people how fired up you are. Don't hold it in. Let people know. Be unashamed of your passion. And I think you'd be surprised how many people might have an outlet for it for you. I'll also say that you don't have to dive in like the deep end. I think sometimes when people look at folks like me, right, and a lot of like the activists in this space, especially youth activists, everybody feels like, oh my God, if I want to make any change, I got to like found my own nonprofit and like start an organization. I'm here to tell you, like, no, you don't. Like, it does not have to be that big at the beginning. It doesn't ever have to be that big. In fact, a reminder that I started out volunteering. I started out tabling events with Planned Parenthood, and then I grew my leadership. So just look for that first step and then let the rest guide you and go toward what excites you and what feels authentic for you and your narrative and your story.
People are thanking you in the comments for how inspiring you are.
Thank you.
So inspiring. But our next question is, do you feel frustrated about how much work Gen Z has to do to fix the mistakes of past generations?
Oh, who wouldn't? This is so unfair. And I think, again, when I asked you guys to think about this, because I think your perspective is incredibly valuable, right? Like, how is this pandemic affecting us as a generation? Young people are really getting hit hard by this pandemic. So many of us are essential workers, right? Working at the grocery store, the gas station, the local restaurant. On top of that, like, these are some of our most valuable and fun years in a sense. And they've been kind of robbed from us, which sucks. It's also an incredibly important time for meeting new people, building our social networks that are not only helpful in terms of keeping us well, right, long into our future, but also helping us be successful in a workplace. So I will start by saying that it's not even just the mistakes of past generations. Like, it's literally the mistakes we're living in right now that are frustrating too. But I will say that, yes, I feel a similar sense of frustration. And it is why I do what I do. It is why I put a fire under the people that I work with, the people who have allowed me into their spaces to bring more young people in, because we are the people most affected. We are the ones who are going to inherit this future. And so we should be making decisions. We should be the leaders today, not tomorrow. And I think all too often organizations and just people generally have this idea that young people should be the implementers, right? We should be the ones out there door knocking. We should be the ones out there canvassing and tabling and doing all of these things, but they hardly ever allow us to be the strategists, the one making the plans, right? They hardly ever allow us in. And so what I'm really fighting for is one, for young people to get compensated fairly and valued in their leadership in that way, but also to make new spaces with increased leadership for young people to be setting the strategy and setting the messaging and allowed in those rooms and not just be the implementers, but be the creators.
Okay, I'm going to throw in one more of my questions
One
here.
more. Yes, ma'am.
Do you think the media is doing a good job of portraying women, sex, and people of color? And do you think there are any creators we should be looking to get this information?
Ooh, what a good question. Okay, recommendations. Do I think the media is doing a good job? No. I think traditional media is never really going to do a good job because, like many traditional institutions, it was never built to. But I do think we have a unique opportunity with social media to create our own senses of media, right? If you think about it, even going back to my Jeff Flake example, right? There is very little likelihood that any news network would have picked up this like 1 3-minute moment in Arizona between a young woman of color and Jeff Flake 10 years ago and put me on the news just because. But they were forced to do so because 18 million people online were engaging with it. And so we have power not only as content creators, people putting things out into the internet, but as content consumers about what we engage with, what we continue to elevate, what we like, share, who we follow. Every day we are voting in that sense. And so do I think traditional media has the capacity to do it? No, at least not in the short term. But I think we have the potential to build social media feeds for ourselves that are anti-racist, that are feminist, that represent us and our values and support those creators who are doing the work that traditional medias are just not. And so some people that I will shout out, maybe I'll put some on my story later so you guys can just see it, but my friend Nupal at Nupal Justice is phenomenal. She is a Black Lives Matter organizer in New York. I'll also shout out Winter Brianne. She's also wonderful. And those are two of the women that I really look up to. Also the Women of Freedom March NYC are just like really killing it. Maybe I'll drop some ats in the comments at the very end for folks to see. But
awesome. Okay, another question I see here in the comments says, how would you suggest fostering a sense of standing up for what you believe in the newer generation, if you're from a previous generation, like if you're a mother and you have girls that you're raising?
Yeah, this is a really good question. I kind of want to talk about my mom here. My mom raised me to be somebody who put standing up for myself and my beliefs above being liked, above following rules, that it was more important to stand up for myself. And she did that in every way, whether it was like, I got in trouble for like dress code and she was like, okay, I'll come pick you up, like whatever. I'm not sure, I'm not a parent. I'm also someone who's sort of mentoring young women while being a young person. But I think the thing that I find to be impactful is to put that first, right? And do it in your actions, do it in your words. Tell them that, standing up for yourself is important. Standing up for what you believe in is worth making sacrifices for. It is worth being unpopular for. And you will find your people and be their people, right? I'll also say, I don't know the position of the person this came from, but I imagine that there's some educators on this call or on this Zoom, on this YouTube stream, I don't know, in this virtual room. And I will say that I think within the education system, we need to make more space too for young people to have those unpopular opinions and to be themselves fully and to embrace them and thank them for bringing their whole selves into the classroom. Because when we do that in the classroom, we encourage them, we reinforce that they can do that elsewhere in meetings, right, in the future, in job interviews. So I think if there are any ways you can embrace students as whole people in a better sense, you might also encourage them to continue to bring their whole selves for the rest of their lives to other rooms.
Yes. Well, we're going to close this up. Thank you so much,
Wonderful.
Asia. Thank you to our audience for their engagement, and to the CGCC team, to Mike and Christina. Don't forget to mark yourselves as attended with the link in the description. And thank you so much. This was amazing.
Yeah. Thank you all for having me. I look forward to seeing you again soon.